Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Monday, April 14th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined by RCP co-founder and president Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So, guys, the Trump administration posted late on Friday that electronics from China would be exempt from these new tariffs. That's good news for Apple and other tech giants. But then over the weekend, Peter Navarro and Howard Lutnick walked back the idea that these exemptions would last. Tom, it does seem to indicate that the future of tariffs may be just as swampy as in the past. And by that, I mean that Washington lobbyists will be fighting now for special treatment for their industries, just like in the good old days. What do you make of what's going on? And do you think these tariffs are here to stay, or they're here for 90 days, or what's going on?
It's really hard to tell. It really is, given what the administration is trying to sort of weave their way through this thicket that they have created on these tariffs. As you mentioned, and the markets were up today. They liked this news, but as you mentioned, they got mixed messages over the weekend. So I don't know what's going on. I'm not sure, a lot of folks know what's going on. Even maybe people within the administration don't know exactly what's going on. I do think the Trump administration is trying to figure out how, and they have a lot of competing voices inside that administration, how to, enact President Trump's vision, which is to use tariffs to keep America from getting ripped off, to bring manufacturing back to the United States, accomplish all of those objectives, while at the same time not sending the market into a full-blown panic and getting an earful from folks on Wall Street and folks in the tech sector, automakers, et cetera. So it's a very complicated situation, and the administration seems to be, I don't want to say making it up as they go along, but there is a sense that if they did have a plan, what's the famous saying, all plans disintegrate upon first contact with reality, or, you get hit in the face. That seems to be kind of what happened here with this tariffs, and they've been kind of, at that point, sort of improvising.
Carl, is this improvisation, or is this part of that four-dimensional chess we heard about last week from some of Trump's supporters?
Yeah, well, let's take that off the table. When I proposed that Donald Trump was trying to do something last week, and you guys accused me of calling him a genius. So let's be simple here. What Tom said, that phrase "mixed message," is the best thing I can think of, Andy. I'll make a comment on what you said about the swampy aspect of it, because that is interesting. But Donald Trump has made it clear, the president, both when he was president the first time, when in the interregnum, when he wasn't president and was running for president, and now, that he considers one of the goals of tariffs to encourage multinationals to invest here in manufacturing in this country. Well, BMW did that. They have a $2 billion plant in South Carolina. And a few days ago, Peter Navarro said, well, that's not what we're talking about. That's not good for America. So it's hard to know, if that's not good for America, then what is the goal of these tariffs? I think Peter Navarro is, giddy over how much money they bring in terms of revenue to the Treasury, but that's temporary, because after a while, if people don't bring anything in, there won't be any tariffs at all. There won't be any money from the tariffs. So I don't really know what the end game is here. The point you're concentrating on, Andy, and that's very interesting, which is that the president will have a dictum. China's been cheating us. They've been cheating us for a long time. They've been stealing intellectual property. They have tariffs of their own, all kinds of hidden tariffs. They're building plants in other countries to, keep labor costs down, and then sending that stuff, NAFTA countries, what we used to call NAFTA countries, Mexico and Canada, and then bringing the stuff in through the back door somehow. He's got this bill of particulars against China as a trading partner, and most of what he says is true. But then, as you point out, he said, wait a minute. When all these millennial, bros who voted for Republican for the first time can't get their new iPhone, well, then the bottom falls out. So, okay, well, they can have a dispensation. And then, Navarro and Lutnick, the two hawks, the tariff hawks in this measure, but that's only temporary. So then, yeah, that's full employment for lobbyists. That's what you're talking about. And I take it that you don't think that's ideal governance.
I think that this is so much a movie that we've seen before. And I just feel, Tom, like this is we're going backwards to sort of an old-fashioned tariff regime, which is selective. It's subject to lobbying. Nobody, we never do industrial planning well in this country. That's the one thing that you can say about the United States. We've tried these sorts of things before. We never get it right. And we'll be back to that, in 6 months, I believe. I think this has been sort of a huge unforced error on the part of the administration, a terrible rollout. And this confusion that we're seeing now, like I say, is as we sort of inevitably go back, I think, to what the worst parts of what a tariff regime would look like. I think it's going to cost them politically, and certainly on the world stage and economically. I'm befuddled.
Well, it might cost him politically. We'll have to wait and see about that. But I will say an alternate viewpoint, which Richard Porter said on the program last week, which I thought was actually really insightful, and I hadn't thought about it this way. But Trump has this amazing ability to bring focus to an issue, bring like laser focus. And he did that on tariffs. I mean, he did that on trade. Trade was an issue. And look, we've got 130 countries as of this morning now that are knocking on our door, wanting to negotiate trade deals with us, right? And Porter's point was, look, the old way of doing things, well, you'd go through a round of the GATT, or the World Trade Organization, and we do these things, and it would take years to get this done. Trump's got it done 2 weeks now. He's completely changed the dynamic.
What has he gotten done in 2 weeks?
Well, we'll see we'll see what these deals turn out to be. But the old way of doing it is going through these tedious negotiations through the World Trade Organization, whatever, that take 3, 5, 7 years, and end up with these sort of incremental, watered down changes, whatever. This is a completely different way of doing things. And maybe it's going to end up worse. Maybe it's going to end up better. I don't think the full story is written here. And
right.
Look, it may cost him politically. It may end up being an economic disaster, or, it could end up being good for America. I think we just have to wait and let it play out until we make a final decision on it. But there's no question that, to Richard's point, this has been, the entire world got focused on the issue of trading with America, reciprocal trade, how things have been done in the past for the past 40 years. Everybody's now thinking about it in a new way, and it happened like that.
Well, my point is that it whatever has happened like that is not going to end up in a thoughtful,
You may be
America,
right, Andy, but you don't know that yet.
Andy, what it reminds me of, though, is the rollout to Obamacare. They had this, the Affordable Care Act. Obama had these principles. Not everybody shared them, but he laid them out. But then they rolled it out. They said, if you like your doctor, you can keep it. No. If you like your health plan, you can keep it. No. Your premiums won't go up. No. Oh, and by the way, their website didn't even work. That's what this reminds me of.
Well, yeah, I buy that. I just say that Tom, I'm willing to sort of entertain the idea that somehow this is going to end up differently than I think it will. But I think that the reason it takes years and years to negotiate these trade negotiations is because they're very complicated, and slowness in and of itself is not always a terrible thing. I mean, I always say 2 cheers for gridlock.
Andy is the most
try to break things and move fast. It doesn't work.
You are the most responsible and reasoned voice of the establishment I've ever heard. God bless you.
All right. Well, you know what? I want to talk about something else, but we're going to save it for the next segment. So you're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl, and we'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I want to talk about some political violence over the weekend. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's residence was attacked after he hosted this Passover dinner at his house. The assailant said that he had planned to beat the governor with a hammer if he could. He used Molotov cocktails in the assault. Carl, must have been very frightening for the governor and his family. What do you make of this latest round of political violence?
Andy, we've had a lot of it, just a spate of it. And, if I say one, you could say one that's earlier, but, I sort of date it, the modern ones. Rand Paul has attacked a senator in his own backyard. Some Bernie bro tried to murder half the, Republicans on the Republican baseball team. And you had Antifa and then, various, the liberals are saying the J6 thing, violently storming the Capitol. We've had all this, but we've also had these other things that.
And we had 2 attempts on
Donald Trump's life. Yeah. But then we've had these other attacks, and they're unfortunately a feature of American public life going back to, James A. Garfield. A random person with obvious mental trouble attacks somebody. This attack reminded me more than anything, I like the attack on Nancy Pelosi's family, and including the guy even had a hammer. And that guy who attacked Paul Pelosi had a hammer. And these are mentally unstable people, the best I can tell, who've they've changed the course of American history. So it's not a minor problem. It's not the same problem as organized political violence, with an agenda. So we shouldn't get too worried about it on one level. On the other level, we should be very worried, because this country has God knows how many people with serious mental health issues walking around untreated, and that, they stalk celebrities, they attack politicians. Remember the newsroom in Annapolis was attacked by a person like this, and he killed all these wonderful journalists. So it's a sobering event, really.
So, Tom, we don't know much about him, but we know he was 38 years old. He's a mechanic. He said on social media, apparently, that he didn't like Democrats. I'm sure we'll find out more about his motives in the future. But terrible night for the country and for the governor and his first family, really.
Absolutely, yeah, and I agree with Carl. I mean, we don't know much about his motivations, and we'll learn more. But I just, and even if you put this one in a different category than an assassination attempt or someone who had a very well-defined motive, it's still disturbing. It's still disturbing that someone has it in their head that they're going to climb over this fence, go inside the governor's mansion, and firebomb the place. I mean, that is just, that's obviously unacceptable, and we shouldn't. We seem unable to, as a society, sort of draw the line, and there are maybe a lot of reasons for that. But it's a terrible story, and I'm really glad that the governor and his family, were unharmed in this. And I mean, on Palm Sunday, I mean, first night of Passover, he's Jewish. Hopefully, that wasn't a motivating factor in this as well, because that would. We've already got enough anti-Semitic stuff going on in the country. We don't need another, that being the motivation for this attack.
Yeah. Well, speaking of political violence, we did have former Washington Post reporter Taylor Lorenz, who was on CNN, and she doubled down on her defense of Luigi Mangione. He's the man who's accused of murdering United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Tom, what'd you make of her sort of defense of him, if you want to call it that? It was it struck a lot of people as sort of shocking.
I was absolutely speechless when I saw her giving this interview and saying that, just basically almost like she was sort of a giggly, schoolgirl who had a crush on this guy, saying, he's smart and he's famous and he's good looking and all of these things. And she said,
and a moral and
said he's a good moral person. He looks like a good moral person. And those are really hard to find these days for women, it was so out of touch. And we've talked about this before, the whole cult that has risen up around Luigi Mangione and, trying to justify or rationalize his cold-blooded murder of this person, in broad daylight on the streets of New York City, is so distorted and disturbing. And yet here she is, just sort of blithely, giggling about it on an interview. I mean, I don't even know what to say about it other than she's terribly misguided, and among the many people, it's just, it's crazy.
And Carl, what do you make of CNN's decision to air this interview, or seek this interview, and air it? Because, it's not really news what she thinks. She's just a former Washington Post reporter. But CNN has to make a positive decision to go ahead and interview her, solicit this kind of thing. Donnie Sullivan, who's the host, giggles and sort of laughs along with her. Is CNN to be indicted alongside her in terms of promoting this kind of viewpoint?
Well, we better be careful using that word indicted, because Trump's president, he may try to indict them. Pam Bondi may try to indict CNN over it. But using the word in the vernacular way, condemned, yeah. I was shocked. Shocked's not the right word, but I was disapproving of that decision. There's a reason she's a former Washington Post reporter and a former New York Times reporter. She attacked her colleagues when she worked at the Post and couldn't get along with them. She's got a history of kind of bizarre statements and behavior. Her especially was doxing people who were not even in the public arena, and then literally crying when she was criticized. And her judgment, Tom points out, she's proven to have no judgment whatsoever. And I don't think she's completely clueless morally, to use the word she used. But yeah, why does CNN put her on the air? What's the purpose of that? It was shock value that this opinion's out there. Fine, but why is she?
She's not a nobody.
Who does she represent, Tom?
It's not a matter of her representing someone. I mean, she has a Substack. She's a well-known, particularly online. I mean, she's a pretty famous person, and maybe you call her infamous because she is formerly of the Washington Post.
She's mainly famous for saying wrong things, Tom.
I understand, but it's not like this was just some random person off the street. And in some ways, it's instructive because she was and still remains sort of an influential online journalist, that she has these views. I mean, it shows, that
right. But let's connect the dots here, guys. She's basically glorifying a murderer. He's charged, not convicted, but let's stipulate for the purpose of this conversation, because she clearly thinks he did it. She wasn't on air claiming he was innocent. She was claiming he's the subtext is she's kind of a hero. That's what leads to things like this Josh Shapiro attack on Josh Shapiro. My point is the media has some responsibility here, Tom. And you take a person who's well known, who you say she's famous. What she's famous for is being irresponsible. CNN doesn't have to put her on the air. She doesn't hold office anywhere. There's no. What do you think, Andy?
I'm trying to think of someone else who's sort of an online, like if Nate's. He doesn't work for anybody right now, but he has a Substack. He's a pretty famous guy. If he said something like this, would that be newsworthy to you? Or would you be like, oh, no, you shouldn't air that? He may not be the best example.
Nate Silver? He wouldn't say it. That's the point.
Carl, you're missing my point. And maybe Nate's not the best example, but the point is he doesn't currently work for a publication, but he has his own Substack, and he's still a pretty prominent guy. And, if he were to give an interview to someone and say something like this, which is truly shocking, should the people who sought the interview, the organization who sought the interview, should they not air that because they want to protect him from that?
Break the tie, Andy. Break the tie.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, whether it's newsworthy or not that she said it, I think you could debate that. I will say this in defense of CNN. I think she represents a point of view that is real and is out there and is disturbing. And to me, that's the story. And I hope people understand that's why we're talking about this on this show. It's not because we want to give more oxygen to this point of view. It's just that we have seen a lot of polling that demonstrates that young Americans in particular do view this suspected murder in a particular way. And that's of interest to me because I find it so shocking, and it's saying to me something disturbing about America that we should discuss. I guess I don't know if that breaks the tie or not, Carl, but
he's with me. He's with me.
So this is the irresponsible caucus that I'm talking to today.
I can't. The other thing is, I guess, because we just dedicated 6 minutes to it on our show. I can't complain about CNN having her on the program. Anyway, we're going to leave it there. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. Don't go away. We'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. And Carl, just sort of want to talk about the Democrats for a minute. We sort of had three different approaches to Trump that came to light over the last few days. We had Bernie Sanders and AOC held a rally in Los Angeles. It's their latest stop in the Fight the Oligarchy tour. Then you had Gretchen Whitmer, who last week met with Trump in the Oval Office, and we can talk about that. And then you have Bill Maher, who I guess is technically independent, but he met with Trump a while ago, and this is what he said about Trump. He said, quote, "He's much more self-aware than he lets on in public. I voted for Clinton and Obama, but I would never feel comfortable talking to them the way I was able to talk with Donald Trump. That's just how it went down. Make of it what you will. Me, I feel it's emblematic of why the Democrats are so unpopular these days." So 3 possible paths for how to take on Trump. What do you make of them? And actually, what do you make of Maher's comments? I thought those were pretty interesting.
Well, I'm going to break with type here because I like to think of myself as a moderate and an independent. But I would say that the one approach that doesn't work is the Gretchen Whitmer approach. Mm-hmm. She meets with the guy and then pulls something over her face. She's like some guy been charged with like child molesting a whole school. You know, they cover during the perp walk.
That was the perp walk.
Yeah, they cover their heads and you can't see them. It was ludicrous. You're going to be in the Oval Office, but it was clownish. And I actually think she's a talented politician who usually has pretty good pitch, but not this time. The Bernie AOC thing is the resistance, you know, and this is the 9th consecutive year of it, or maybe the 10th, depending on how you count it. So I'm getting used to the playbook. Elon Musk tweeted something over the weekend of Bernie calling out oligarchs in the same exact language since like starting in 1993, just giving the same speech over and over again. That's a word, you know, that he likes, and he's, if nothing, he's consistent. Now in those, you know, since 1993, in that iteration, the Democrats have identified their own oligarchs and tapped into them and raised billions and billions of dollars from them, including to host some of these rallies. So, you know, there's an issue on that side. Bill Maher obviously is. Yeah. All right, I'm going to say something. You guys can't laugh.
I'm already laughing when you preface something with that, Carl.
The Bill Maher approach is what Gavin Newsom is doing in California. He had Steve Bannon on his show and Charlie Kirk. If you can't even talk to the opposition, especially when the opposition is led by the sitting president of the United States, you have a problem. And I think that's what Bill Maher is getting to. In terms of, you know, I only had one conversation with Trump in my life. I was pool duty in his first term, and I saw him in operation a couple of times. Tom's had more time with him than I have. But people who do spend time with him say this, is that he's invariably more conversant and, you know, sort of less didactic and sort of easier to get along with in this private setting than you might think from watching the public Trump, especially if you're not on his side on some of these issues. So I think what Bill Maher's doing is what Democrats need to do. And I think what Bernie and AOC are doing, they feel it's heartfelt. They're doing what they believe in. I don't know. The Gretchen Whitmer approach is thumbs down for me.
Well, Tom, 3 choices. What do you make?
Well, I'm going to disagree with Carl about Gretchen Whitmer being a talented politician. I mean, this was, you know, she managed to get herself reelected, but she has these moments. Do you remember during the campaign where she fed that woman the Dorito who was on her knees? I mean, it was like the most bizarre.
That was a little cringy.
It was right. like where did that come from? So she has these really sort of tin-eared moments recently where, and this one was another one. I mean, look, if you're going to go to the Oval Office, own it, right? Don't try and hide your face. And she was.
Well, so you don't really disagree with me, because that's the point I made.
No, I agree with you. It was a thumbs down approach. I'm just saying, you said she was a talented politician. I have to question that after this latest incident, because, you know, look, if you're going to go to the Oval Office, you know you're going to get criticized. So I was going to say be a man, but be a woman.
Cowgirl up.
Own it. Be whatever you want to be, but whatever. Own it. And she wasn't willing to do that. And by trying to have it both ways, she got criticized rightly for sort of doing what she did.
She got criticized coming and going. She got criticized on her left from even going to the White House, and on the right from being disrespectful to the president. So that's not the best thing. But
I think the problem with it too for her is it was a decision she made sort of impromptu on her own. There wasn't anyone whispering in her ear saying, "Cover your face." That's the real Gretchen Whitmer. I mean, that's those moments of the sort of reveal.
Not a profile in courage.
Yeah. So pretty cringy, I guess.
Are we leaving out the possibility that she was trying to be funny? Is there any room for that?
Okay. No,
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay.
Carl, you're being generous and gracious, and I appreciate that. I do want to talk, because I can't resist talking a little bit about Blue Origin today. Tom, they sent an all-female space crew up there. They were accompanied by television personality Gayle King, Katy Perry, the singer, and the fiancé of the founder of Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos, Lauren Sanchez, all went along for the ride. Pretty irresistible story. I'm sorry, but I wish there was a political angle on this. Maybe there is. Maybe there isn't.
Oh, there is definitely. Remember Christina McCullough?
Let's just say it was a happy ending. They spent 11 minutes in sort of suborbit and landed safely. So, I mean, talk about your bad headlines, bad PR. If Jeff Bezos had blown up his fiance, that would have been like the all-time worst headline ever imaginable. So that didn't happen. So, but this whole thing, they were promoting it, and they had, all these glam shots of the women with the hair being blown back. And, Lauren Sanchez comes out modeling her suit, with their boobs hanging. I mean, it was, I don't understand what was going on here. It was all seemed to be sort of just a photo op, PR stunt for Bezos for Blue Origin to be in the news. I'm not sure what the flight actually accomplished anything. I don't know that it was weird, but on the good side, it did end safely and everybody's back home.
It was, Carl, sort of a Star Trek episode in terms of the outfits and everything, sort of mixed with, I think, what was supposed to be about female empowerment, right? I mean, all women going to space, right?
That's right. I mean, you're tempted to make a joke. I remember the old right winger, what's his name? John G. Smits, who was a John Bircher in Orange County, California, local California politician, was asked about when Nixon went to China. And he said, well, I don't mind him going to China. It's his coming back that I object to. But look, these astronauts, we want them to come back. And in all seriousness, when I heard about this, I mean, my mind immediately went to Krista McAuliffe, the teacher who was just as beautiful as a movie star and smart and very popular. And, she went up on NASA, put her on a spaceship, and that spaceship blew up and she died along with these astronauts. And I think it's, NASA's been hesitant to do those kinds of things for this reason. Even though they're in suborbit, it's dangerous. And I'm just happy they all got back safe.
Well, okay. Well, good. I think we got some politics into that story. I don't know if we did or didn't. Anyway, you're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. Don't go away. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined now by Susan Crabtree, national political correspondent for RCP, and the co-author of the new book on California politics called Fool's Gold: The Radicals, Con Artists, and Traitors Who Killed the California Dream and Now Threaten Us All. So, Susan, welcome back to the program, and congratulations again on the book.
Thank you so much, Andy. It's great to be with you again.
So I wanted to talk about your latest piece for RCP. It's got a California angle to it. But I want to start with something which happened today. We're talking about the Secret Service. So today, Monday, DHS Secret Secretary Kristi Noem announced a new ad campaign to encourage recruitment of U.S. Secret Service agents. Here's just a little bit of the ad.
Sometimes being a hero means staying in the shadows, watching where no one thinks to look, being smarter, faster, stronger than a threat no one else sees before it arrives. Not all heroes wear capes, but when you serve with us, even when no one sees you, someone is always looking up to you.
The United States Secret Service is calling for a few more heroes. Will you step forward?
So there you have it. The commercial, it features 13-year-old Secret Service agent DJ Daniel. We remember him. He was recently presented his badge and credentials by the U.S. Secret Service director, named Sean Curran, during Trump's address to the joint session of Congress. Kristi Noem, of course, makes an appearance, narrates the piece. What'd you make of the ad, and what are you hearing from your sources inside the Secret Service about it?
Well, this is the second recruitment ad, as you may know, Andy. There was one during the Super Bowl that cost $2 million. It was made by a Hollywood producer. People started questioning whether that money was well spent. While DOJ was in full gear attacking other agencies and cutting USAID and other agencies. We've since heard that the Secret Service will not be immune to DOJ cuts, but they will not apply to agents. I think this is a first good step. Obviously, the agency needs to run recruitment ads. It's hemorrhaging agents. Over the last month, I've been hearing a lot about this. I've been waiting to hear what Sean Curran is doing in terms of his reforms, and I haven't been hearing a lot. I've been asking for a sit-down interview with Sean Curran. He's only given a couple very quick interviews, one to Sean Hannity that wasn't very substantive. And we've seen a lot of, really that was a wonderful moment with DJ Daniels at the State of the Union, but we haven't heard a lot since then. From agents, I have been hearing a lot, and they are telling me that they are hemorrhaging agents, and a lot of them are going to the or applying to go to the Drug Enforcement Agency because DEA opened some lateral moves. It's open to lateral moves from other agencies, but there's way more people wanting to apply from the Secret Service than there are spaces. I'm talking hundreds of agents, and there's, I believe the Secret Service is, last I checked on their frequently asked questions, it's like 3,200 agents they're supposed to have, but they don't have that many. That's for sure. Wow. Well, the ad you mentioned that played during the Super Bowl was directed by Michael Bay, who was not just any Hollywood director. He's the master of disaster films. And this ad felt a lot like that ad, although with Kristi Noem, who's come under some criticism recently, narrating it. What'd you make of her sort of appearance in the ad? And again, what do people in the agency think about Kristi Noem? Well, I think that I think she plays a good role here in terms of being a narrator. She's the leader of the agency. I would have liked to have seen Sean Curran take a more leadership type role in this ad, and not just the last one. There was a close-up, a cameo of him from that iconic moment during the assassination attempt, and it zoomed in on him. Mm-hmm. And some people questioned, some of the Secret Service community were questioned whether that was, sort of to promote him or not, and whether that was a good idea with the $2 million budget that ad had. But I think that the Secret Service agents are not happy right now. They're not happy with Kristi Noem because there was cuts announced last week, Monday, that I covered. I was the first to have that story. The email from Kristi Noem came out Monday. I had the story on Friday that it was coming. And there was a lot of jitters because they didn't know if it was going to apply to agents or not, and when they're dealing with a manpower shortage. So it did not, the news out of the email was it did not apply to agents. But, Secret Service they're not happy with Sean Curran. They're not happy with Kristi Noem because they thought that this would bring a lot of change. And the new leadership at the Secret Service after Trump's victory, certainly after the concern over the assassination attempts, if change is happening, which I do give Sean Curran the benefit of the doubt, that he's probably making changes within the agency, but he's not being very vocal about it. And we see this, the first step they're taking is 2 recruitment videos. and a very symbolic, although very, heartwarming story about DJ Daniels, making him an official or an honorary agent. All of that is good, but there are deep concerns within the Secret Service. Nobody has been fired from the 2 assassination attempts, even though I'm hearing rumblings that some discipline has been recommended, but has not been applied yet because there's a process, and some of the agents are fighting that with their lawyers. But we haven't seen any changes. There were promotions that came out. There was criticism of some of those promotions that they were continuance of the DEI policies, at least to some effect, under Kim Cheadle. And so I have questions in the Secret Service, and I'm not getting a lot of answers over the last 2 weeks.
Well, you're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm talking with Susan Crabtree, and we've been talking about the Secret Service. She is probably the world's leading reporter, I would say, when it comes to what's going on inside the Secret Service. So we always want to check in with her on that. But I do want to talk about something else, California and Chicago, or Los Angeles and California and Chicago, I'm sorry. You've had a piece in Real Clear Politics. You called it A Tale of Two Sanctuary Cities. You looked at how Chicago and L.A. have responded differently to Donald Trump. Just give us the headline. What's the difference, and what's the reason for the difference in the way they've handled Trump?
Well, Chicago went on offense last week after Trump tweeted an end to sanctuary cities, and he basically unloaded on the concept of sanctuary cities, that it's it's endangering the citizens and keeping any cooperation between local police and federal authorities, mainly ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So the Governor Pritzker in Illinois went on offense. He said, we're not going to be scared by this. We stand by our sanctuary policies and we will fight it tooth and nail. And so did Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson. We had a complete silence on the issue on the other 3,000, well, I guess it's 2,200 miles away in Los Angeles and San Francisco. And Governor Newsom, they're obviously busy talking rebuilding from the fires. They're still having, there's been criticism of lack of progress. Only a few houses have been permitted to rebuild. But yet Karen Bass is under fire, as you know, out there. She is facing a recall. And
Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, right?
Correct, yes. So she's facing a recall because questioning her leadership, why she was in Ghana, and all of the mismanagement that we saw on a horrific display in January when those fires just leveled Pacific Palisades and Altadena. So it was interesting to me that they were very quiet about this in response, because they still don't have much of their wildfire disaster relief that they're seeking from the federal government. There is a bill that's on its way. I'm hearing from the reporting out in California, and some people in and around the governor's administration are saying that they expect a supplemental disaster relief in the late spring or summer that will address what they've requested, up to $30 to $40 billion from the federal government for disaster relief. That's not forthcoming yet, although some is trickling out from FEMA and from other places. I think they've received about $2 billion so far, according to a press release from the governor's office.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this is fascinating because you have these two democratically controlled cities and democratically controlled states. And in what I sort of get from your piece is that the sort of local politics is pretty important here, that, as you say, Karen Bass in Los Angeles is looking to the federal government for relief, for federal relief. So they're sort of viewing this through that lens. Meanwhile, Mayor Brandon Johnson, who is just his political career is cratering in Chicago, lowest, I think, like 9% approval rating or something like this. But he's taking this very different sort of tact. At the same time, you step it up once and look at the state houses. Again, you've got J.B. Pritzker, who thinks he should be president of the United States, like a lot of Democratic governors do. And he sort of wants to really confront the administration. He's going for this sort of full resistance mode. And then you've got Gavin Newsom, who people are trying to keep up with what he's up to, but he's generally taken a different tack. He's launched this podcast. He's had all these sort of conservative firebrands on. He got shouted down at the View today. They attacked him for this. But so his view is sort of different, I guess, that I guess he's trying to sort of find some sort of middle ground for the Democrats. Does that square with what you're talking about? I mean, does that sort of reflect what your reporting shows?
I always say that Gavin Newsom is performative. He's trying to run via podcast for president because he doesn't have the receipts for governing his state. He's basically run it into the ground, in my humble opinion. We did the research on the book Fool's Gold for 2.5 years, investigating why there has been so much gross mismanagement. And everybody knows about the failed policies in California, but they don't know about the corruption. And there's so much going on in California. There's been so many bad headlines lately, yet Gavin Newsom tries to just skim above the surface and say it's all great. They're open for business, trying to negotiate with different countries for their own tariff deals, while Donald Trump is, and people say that that's not even, constitutional lawyers say that's not even feasible. But certainly Gavin Newsom, as we write in our book extensively on, is open for business to the Chinese government. And he's opened, he had a nonprofit, as we go into in great detail. As mayor, he opened this China SF nonprofit, brought in more than 100 Chinese companies into California. That is part of there was a self-dealing element to that, with him pouring his wines in China and not getting Chinese companies to California companies into China. But when you talk about the corruption, lately, California's had several bad headlines. Its insurance commissioner was just found out, because there's the insurance the state's in crisis. Their insurance companies, Farmers, was canceling, as you know, policies before the wildfires. People who were victims of the fire didn't have insurance. The rates are going through the roof, and the insurance commissioner was found recently to be spending all this money on domestic and overseas trips, taxpayer money, and had nothing to do with insurance. And this is according to one of the most mainstream publications, Cal Matters, that does really good work in California.
So I've got about a minute left here, and something you touched on, which I want to talk about in the minute we have left, which is this sort of idea that Gavin Newsom is pushing back on the tariffs and is almost launching his own foreign policy when it comes to tariffs. Again, real questions of whether you can do that as a state, but it is California, it's a big state. Is that is that something he could do, and is that a winning position in California right now? I mean, is that something that would be popular with Californians?
Well, I think I always ask around about Gavin Newsom's popularity. I haven't seen a good poll recently, but when it comes to whether he can run for president, even Kamala Harris is doing better than he's doing, despite the podcast, according to recent polls. Mm-hmm. I think that's an open question. I doubt that constitutional scholars will say he can negotiate his own foreign policy. He's just trying to separate himself, but not he's trying to move to the center, triangulate basically with his own party, but his policies aren't changing at all. As you know, we talked about that with the men and women's sports. He hasn't changed the policy, even though he told Charlie Kirk that it was deeply unfair. But this is one aspect that he sees that's very deeply unpopular for the President Trump, the tariff issue, and is now very volatile. So he's trying to take advantage of that. I think it's mere rhetoric. I think it's just him being performative, acting out the parts, and not really providing real solutions for everyday Californians. Yeah.
Well, Susan, great to have you on the show. I should say to you, thanks for coming on, because there was an earthquake just right before we went on the air, right? But
I'm just glad there aren't any aftershocks. Yeah, it was a 6.0 earthquake in North County, San Diego. So it was a little shaken up.
Well, I'm glad you came through and joined us on the show. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I've been talking with Susan Crabtree. My name is Andrew Walworth. That's our show for today. So we'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great evening.